This is Long Rides. We're talking about risks today, creative risks, particularly a risk like the risk of cheating on your wife in this episode, and whether or not it'll pay off. In all of my relationships, being the one cheated on, it pays off. Typically, it goes very well for them. So what were you thinking for this episode?
Well, I was just going to talk more about creative risk in terms of art and taking risks with like genre, plot structure, stuff like that. Are we cool to do that?
Yeah, we could do that.
Okay.
I guess I'll allow it.
All right, cool. So, what do you consider to be a creative risk?
Well, I mean, I guess how I break it down, I look to a lot of structures more as music theory than like plot structure, like the hero's journey and stuff like that typically. So for instance, the big thing that I always think about is, I think I've mentioned this before, harmony and dissonance. So you have to have like a familiar enough structure that people can follow what's going on. They kind of know the story beats, nothing too abstract. And this is for like pop culture. This isn't, some experimental film shown in festivals. We're talking mainstream art. But you need a certain level of harmony that's familiar with people, the 4/4 beat, if you will. But you need a level of dissonance to make it stand out, of course, which would be like a verse or just an unfamiliar kind of sound, something that sets it out, a hook. And that's why, something like, for me, Stranger Things is a very uninteresting show because there's no hook. It's just things I've seen before, done not as well. So I think the Beatles were masters of that, where they would put together these very strange chord progressions and stuff, but they would know to do it for a bridge or for an outro or in a way that was very economical. And I think a lot of plot structure actually gets into the economics of storytelling, which is a fascinating concept that I've struggled to come to a decent understanding of pretty much the last decade and a half. What are your thoughts on creative risk? But the risks are the dissonance, the things that make you stand out. You're killing your character off halfway through the story or something.
Yeah, I think in terms of creative risk, it heavily depends on context. Because like you're saying, like dissonance, there's already an established like status quo or established normality. The best example I can think of is different genres where one topic or one point of view or one angle or one arc could be considered like risque or taboo or very unconventional. I think that's a big key to something risky is considered outside of the norm. Like, for instance, talking about like intercourse or sex or any other topic like that in Christian fiction might be considered a little bit out there for some readers for that particular audience, whereas in the romance genre or most other genres, that's kind of...
It'd be the opposite. Talking about religion would be...
yeah, but that too. So I don't know for me personally if there's any universal definitions. I think it is very, what are the conventions of the genre or the conventions of a form, just along those lines. And risk to me, again, is pushing past that boundary and sort of a challenge to yourself, but also a challenge to your audience. I think it kind of puts heavy burden on your audience and heavy burden on yourself as a creator. Something that doesn't come easily.
Yeah, it's interesting that we talked about this week. I didn't think about it until after we had talked about using this topic. But it's a good week too because The Last of Us 2 came out. And it has one of the biggest risks, basically, probably of our this decade of storytelling. Whereas, I won't get into the risk or anything. Like, everybody already knows what happens.
Yeah.
Everybody already has their opinion. Some are right and other people disagree with mine. But it's an interesting thing where I could see, without getting into the details of that, just because I've been having that on my mind this past week, I could see the idea of that working if it's done well, but they had to force characters in a pre-existing story into another story entirely and had to change those characters in order to cram them into the story they wanted to tell. And it was a very interesting thing that I heard about in an analysis of it that said that that's bad storytelling when you have characters and they would naturally do one thing but you want to tell a certain story. So you make them do the opposite of what that character would do in order to put them in the situation you need them to be in to tell that story. And when I heard that, and it's relevant for risk because I think about some of the ones I've taken or I've read that didn't pan out, or ones that I thought might have panned out better than they actually did. I think that that's a pretty good indicator if you're trying to force it, or if you make a character kind of bend over backwards so that they'll act out of character in order to make it happen.
That actually relates to my next question a little bit. Do you think there are times when it's appropriate to just go for it, take that jump, and times that you should just play it safe?
I mean, it's hard to say, because in some ways I think that depending on what kind of thing you're writing, this is going to be a cop-out answer, but sometimes playing it safe is taking a risk, in the sense that, like, I think that cliches are so looked down upon today in storytelling. We want to deconstruct everything. We want to postmodernize everything. And it gets into that kind of David Foster Wallace argument of postmodernism versus just straight, honest storytelling. That sometimes leaning into the cliche, because there's a reason that cliches exist, there's a reason archetypes exist, and it's because we enjoy them. And if you can celebrate those risks, or celebrate those tropes in a way, or if it's honestly what you think the character would do was kind of the most cliche thing, I'd say to stick with it. You know, I mean, there are some stories that are just, I don't want to say run-of-the-mill, I don't want to put them down, but cliche, so to speak. They fit those archetypes. I love the movie Aquaman because it does that so well. And because it's clearly just telling a King Arthur story, but reskinning it with Aquaman. But it embraces and has so much reverence for those kind of stories. And it is just a big blockbuster, but it's a celebration of blockbusters. And I get that watching it, at least. So, like, if it works, it works. I hate to cop out saying that, but, like, the risks, if it doesn't feel honest, I'd say to skip it. Because at least me personally, there's always like a weird conscience with writing where I know if something's right or not. Even if I don't always like it or agree with it, there's always something, or it's probably just OCD, that's just like, this is the right choice to make, or this isn't. And I'll even try to do something else and it just doesn't work, and it's because I know that it's just not the right thing to do.
I think it's like an intuition, like sort of like a sense.
Yeah, that's probably better.
Works for your book or not. To me, again, like I don't want to be as cop out, but I also say it depends, especially if you are writing for a particular genre and audience, because specific genres have specific audiences who follow that genre, and you have a lot of those like 10 books you can read if you liked Perks of Being a Wallflower, which are books that are very much like it and follow the very same pattern. I think it is appropriate to play it safe, especially if you enjoy books like that, like, writing the story you want to hear. If you want to hear a Perks of Being a Wallflower again, like, and you want to write something like that sort of pays homage to it, then I think it's, okay to play it safe if that's what you want. And I also think, in terms of genre, usually people who read books like that expect something like specific. There's like, I don't know, like an unwritten rule, I guess, with expectations. Like, for instance, gonna dive into the Christian fiction genre again. You have a character who, turns atheist at the end. That might not go over well with a lot of the Christian fiction audience. And if you have like Left Behind Part 7 or something like that, I don't know. And that's like the big twist at the end. That might not go over well with your audience. So maybe that might not be the best move to make, but maybe it can be. I don't know. But I don't really write that genre. But I also think staging your career maybe too. Especially, I've been reading a lot of articles by editors, agents, and publishing houses, because I've been trying to get my own book polished up and ready to go, and like faux pas and mistakes, that you don't want to make as a first-time novelist. I've definitely heard a lot more agents complain that a lot of the books, I don't want to say that they're out there, but if you want to publish in a certain genre, you should understand what the rules are, what the expectations are, and you don't want to like genre bend too much. I mean, unless it's like an outstanding work, they usually encourage first-time writers to like follow the norm, because they're like, we don't know this person, they don't know you, they don't know your name, they don't know if your books are going to sell yet. I mean, unless you have like other things that you've done, but that's just from what I've heard. Now, do I agree with that entirely? Not really, but I think it is something to keep in mind, especially for me as like a first time. So I think in situations like that, it might be like I wouldn't publish a Cement Garden as like my first book. I'd probably stick to something more like Perks, because that is like an easier to digest story for a lot of people. But
a good a big thing for me is I never want to demonize agents and stuff, because we're working almost in opposition of them. But I respect what they do and their job, and I'm a lot easier on them than on other people, oddly enough. But their goal is to sell a book to an audience that'll stand out, but also will appeal. And so you can't really fault them for that. Like it may not always create the best art. I definitely agree.
Yeah.
But for better and worse, it is a marketplace and it is a job. But a good example of that kind of fiction, which is one I've never read, I'm not familiar with for the most part. It doesn't appeal to me personally with my interests. But the Game of Thrones books, with, okay, it's a high fantasy and all that, but then your moral hero character gets killed off halfway through the first book or whatever that character does. Something like that's familiar enough, but then it has something that's going to be your hook, so to speak, that's going to really draw people in. I'm like, oh, wow, I can't believe that happened. That was a risk that paid off, and, essentially cemented it as one of the most famous series of all time for decades.
See, as far as Game of Thrones goes, I read the first book, and knowing that Sean Bean was cast as Ned Stark in the show, I'm like, well, that's foreshadowing in itself, because like Sean Bean, just dies and everything, and they actually have a video of like the top 10 Sean Bean deaths in movies. So I don't know, but how much of a risk that is.
What if he lived in the book, but then he was cast like, oh, well, we have to kill this guy. What do we do for the rest of our show?
Like it's in the contract that this is like a very short-term commitment. Like I can see that.
That's happened before, I think. I don't know about like adaptations, but it's definitely happened in shows before. The actors like, you got me for one season. Al Pacino in that what the heck's that? Hunters on Amazon. I think it's something like that, where it's like, here's a new show with Al Pacino, but he's only in it for a year because he's Al Pacino. He's lazy.
I think I've seen kind of the inverse happen, like Pretty Little Liars. I know, don't judge me, but I used to watch the show with some of my gal pals, and I know people who read the books and stuff, and they said that one of the characters, I think Toby, dies in the books, but in the show he's around till the end because he was very well liked. So like, I've seen it happen in the inverse, where they just kept renewing that guy's contract and kept going with it. Or Twin Peaks, where like, was it Bob or something, was just like a camera guy or someone who was caught on set, and they just set a run with it because they liked him.
Yeah. A good example of that too. This is one of my favorites ever. I'll never read the book. This is totally off track, but it's a risk in adaptation, so it's relevant, I think, because you're risking pissing the fans off.
Yeah.
But it was Jaws, and the character Matthew. What the hell's his name? Is it Brody? This is embarrassing. Yeah, Matt Brody. Played by what the heck's his name? Dreyfuss. Richard Dreyfuss? Yeah. His character slept with Roy Scheider's character. Brody's the sheriff's name, because that's Roy Scheider. Oh my god, that's gonna drive me so crazy. That's like top 3 favorite movie characters of all time. I can't remember his name now. Matt Hooper. That's it. So Matt Hooper, originally a scumbag, he sleeps with Scheider's wife, and he gets eaten at the end of the book, which I hear the book's great. I know that author, whose name I've always heard, if you want to not remember any names, get yourself on camera and they'll all just fall out of your head.
Oh my gosh.
Peter Benchley. Yeah, he's a good writer. I've read his other stuff and enjoyed it, but I will never read Jaws, even though it's like top 3 favorite movies ever for me. Love it, obsessed with it, because I love the character Matt Hooper so much that seeing him, like, instead of just being like a lovable kind of nerdy guy who's rich, but he's not really like a tough guy, and he's thrown in with the bounty hunter character and all that. Just seeing him be like a total piece of crap and then killed is just so unappealing to me, and how much I love and see that character. It'll feel like a betrayal of the movie to me. And I think eventually was famously taken off set of that film because of some of those differences, that it got so heated that they had to remove him from the set.
Oh, jeez.
And I think Spielberg was right.
Spielberg?
Yeah, so that'd be a good example of like not...
Yeah.
Like, that would have been more of kind of a risk to have that kind of character in there and those complexities.
Yeah.
And Spielberg was like, no, fuck that. We want a lovable team of 3 men going out to kill the beast. And I think it totally paid off, and probably made me a much less masculine man, because I grew up idolizing Hooper when I should have been idolizing any other man in that movie.
Oh.
So that killed me for being an A-type personality. So don't do that. You'll ruin lives.
I think, sort of taking us back to the question here a little, I think risks too can be appropriate if you know, depending on your intention, or just the way things work out. For instance, I don't know if you've ever seen I Love Lucy.
A long time ago.
Yeah, you know, Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. Like, Lucy plays obviously herself in the show, and then Desi Arnaz plays Ricky, and this is back, obviously this is like a black and white show, 1950s era, and there's an arc in the show around, I think maybe like the end of the second or like third season or so, where, you know, Lucille Ball herself is pregnant, and she's, you know, gonna have, Lucy and Desi are gonna have their first kid, and I remember it being such a big deal that Lucy Ball had like a pregnancy arc, like, you know, Lucy wanted, because Lucy ran Desilu Productions, which produced the I Love Lucy show, and she was very adamant about, you know, having that in there, and again, this was such a big deal. Like, I know, and my mom told me this because, you know, back in the day, she was born in the 50s, like, you couldn't even say like pregnancy or pregnant in public or even talk about it, because it was considered like obscenity, and it violates actually like part of the, you know, obscenity laws. And so this was such a huge risk that they were taking with the show, like losing viewers, possibly, you know, being fined or something like that. But they kept strong, they stayed strong to it, and it made for some really good comedy. The birth of Little Ricky on the show is probably one of my favorite episodes, and it made for some like really good comedy, really good moments, really heartwarming moments too. And I think it also helped break down that like barrier of pregnancy being like considered a taboo topic. And I think without her taking that risk, and without her jumping to that forefront and committing to that, and everyone fully committing to it as well, I'm sure, you know, we could still have 16 and pregnant today, but it probably would have happened a lot later than it did without her, you know.
That would be a real shame.
Yeah, damn it. But I think with breaking down like barriers and such, or with everything like John Waters and Divine, like all of their work in the 80s and stuff, like I think it was very cool to see like some boundary pushing. I think that can be worthwhile and fun.
Speaking of John Waters and Divine, one of my friends on Facebook, and I don't know her well enough that I'm comfortable saying this, but she's like a model or something in this area, and she posted the behind the scenes thing for some music video that she's a part of. It was something weird. I don't know what the hell the title was, but it was very John Waters Divine, and like she just puts like her in front of a green screen or whatever, and I was like, oh, that's neat, you're in a music video, I'll check it out. And it was like a bunch of like drag queens with like weird plastic masks on, very like 90s Florida scene kind of stuff, for people familiar with that kind of stuff, like just like hot dog water and hot dog slice jello stuff, and they're just like shoving it, like spreading it on their face, and like deviled eggs baked into like a cake and shit like that, and they're just like, it's just the grossest fucking shit I've ever seen in my life. And whatever, I mean, that's their art. I'm not like knocking it, but I couldn't finish it. It's like, this makes me want to puke, and I know that's the point, but
Well, now I'm kind of curious. I finally got back on Facebook, so I might have to check it out.
Yeah, you missed out on a lot.
It wasn't gone too long, I don't think. I mean, even that in itself was kind of like, I don't say risky because we own a business, but I don't know. I mean, I think it paid off.
That was a risk. It was a creative risk.
Yeah, it was really interesting.
Minimalism.
It was interesting too because I felt myself being like more productive the less time I spent on Facebook and stuff. Like, wow, I feel like I'm being a little more creative, that I've gotten rid of this like thing, this time suck. Anyway, moving on. What do you do when your out there idea falls flat? So you take a risk and it just doesn't pan out. Maybe it just didn't go over as well as you thought it would, or maybe you had one intention and it didn't even translate. Like, how do you come back from that?
I mean,
or how do you handle it?
I guess typically what happens is, and this is something I think there's so many like people, like the people around the Star Wars movies, and Rian Johnson, I guess, is the big one that people don't like. And I always say I like to do Brick a lot. That's the only thing I've seen by him.
Is that Joseph Gordon-Levitt?
Yeah, that's a really good movie.
Yeah.
I don't really know his other work. I can't comment on it because I've never seen it, but him, or what's that one? He did the remake of Death Note. Adam Wingard, he's a real big douchebag, and he keeps falling upward. The worse movie he makes, the bigger of a project he gets next. And recently, the dude running Naughty Dog, Druckmann, something like that, Chris Druckmann, something like that. All these people, major creative risks is what I'm getting at, and it resonated very strongly with some fans, and it did not at all with other fans. It pissed other fans off, and they always come back with kind of like vitriol and all that, and I always just think like maybe the best way to like present some of those things is just to say, we did our best with this. We hope you like it, and just leave it at that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying all these people necessarily were like horrible, like you have to like it, and I get there's, you always have to account for trolls, and you got to account for people who are mean-spirited and stuff like that.
Negative.
Yeah, you got to put that disclaimer. Fuck negativity. You can make it millions. You can deal with someone not like. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, boo-hoo.
I can see that.
You got a bad score on Metacritic. Meh. My grandma's fucking dead. I watched her die at 60. I don't care. You know what I mean? It's like there's real problems in life.
Yeah.
Like, I don't feel bad that happened. I'm not saying it's right. I don't do that. I don't believe in review bombing. I think it actually hurts the real criticisms. I thought I was doing a video specifically about that. But, like, when you take a risk like that, it's not going to resonate with people. It's going to alienate people. So, like, it's not a shock when it doesn't resonate with people. There's always going to be idiots on the internet.
Yeah. I think
who take it too far.
Yeah, I think going into it level-headed, knowing that it might not work out for everyone, or everyone might not get it, I think is better than just going in and saying this is the next great American movie, the next great American novel, or what have you. I think not setting your expectations for this being the greatest thing, because there's a quote out there that has nothing to do with this conversation, but it goes like, you could be the nicest, juiciest, prettiest peach in the entire world, and you'll always run into somebody who doesn't like peaches. So it's like, you could have like an absolute masterpiece of a movie. It could like do everything perfectly. It could have executed the risk or whatever happened like exactly how you wanted it to, and it resonates really well and very highly rated by critics or whatever, but fans might not like it. It might be the greatest movie, might have excellent sound mixing, really great like visuals and cinematography, the acting might be spot on, dialogue is pristine, but you're gonna have people out there who don't like it for whatever reason. And it could, I think, just because art is so subjective, I mean, it's very hard to make like let's say like an objective criticism on something like that, but there's always gonna be like naysayers, there's always gonna be trolls, there's always gonna be, but I don't think taking it to heart is gonna help. I mean, it's kind of like it should stand on its own. Like, in your book, like, Conditional Love, I think there's a quote from there that I really like about, or like a sentiment that I really like about, West, the main character, is trying to like explain and justify his work, and someone comments saying something along the lines of, you know, your work has to be able to stand on its own out there. You're not going to always be around to defend it. And I think making the work strong enough to be able to stand on its own is key going into it, but knowing that you're not going to always be there to defend it is a very realistic point of view, because you can't just sit there and respond to every negative comment. I mean, I've seen people who tried, and it just can be like long and exhausting, and for me, I think it depends on the stage too that you attempt something. Like, for instance, with my book, like the first 2 drafts sounded like that I forced you to read just sound like incoherent jargon, and taking your feedback to heart. Like, I'm trying to do something that's very different from what I do normally, like thematically, and just writing a novel. I'm not really a huge like novel writer, but where are we going?
We're gonna, whatever this is, take out cats or something like that?
What? Taking out cats?
I think so.
Let's see. Anyway, what's my train of thought?
I don't know, you talk while I figure this out here.
Yeah. Actually, there's do not, I mean, we could risk it, and it says do not enter, so it has like an arrow, and it's crossed out. I believe in you. I believe that's another part of taking a risk. You just have to believe in yourself sometimes.
That's what I was thinking, yeah. It's funny how often we drive down this street and how we still can never find a good place to turn around.
No. Oh, man.
It's horrible.
See, you took the risk and we made it.
Yeah, it paid off.
Yeah. We can end the video right here, right now.
Well, I have a little more to say
I'm kidding.
about that. Yeah.
I'm kidding. I have a lot more to say as well.
Yeah, with the risk thing, and like with people not taking it, you know, there's always this binary. It's called the invisible enemy, I hear, where it's like a troll or a bigot or something like that. If they don't like your art, and you create an invisible enemy so that you can deflect any criticism because it's this evil, stupid, whatever kind of person you want to invent to discredit any criticism of your art. And I think it's important to listen to reviews and stuff, and not just like professional ones, like people's opinions, but you got to know too when to like what to take into account and what not to. I know other people who like take every criticism to heart.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like being a pussy, you know? Like at some point you got to stand up for yourself. And you can say like, you know, listen, this character did this that was set up by that motivation. If you paid attention, you would get that. You know what I mean? Like there's a difference between that and then just saying like, well, if you didn't like it, you're just a troll. Which there seems to be a lot of these days.
Yeah.
But like, I think the most important thing for me is, at least, and I'm pretty young in the game with writing, speaking age-wise, so like I just see it as like a learning experience where I'm like, okay, I tried that, it didn't quite work out, you know, I'll figure something out for the next book, and it's just that's just it, you know. It's not always like, you know, this is the best thing I've ever done and will ever do, and if it doesn't work, I'm, you know, going to jump out the window. Usually it's much more like, okay, so that didn't work for people. Why didn't it work for some people? And some of those things that don't work for everybody, I like more than the things that everybody likes. Some of the ones that I wrote that were pretty much liked the most, I like a lot less. And that's okay. Like you said, it's a matter of like taste and opinion, and you know, it's not always a debate. It could be a productive conversation in which you just obtain an understanding of each other's side.
Yeah, and also to what you're saying, you have to consider the source of like whatever criticism or whatever naysayers you're getting, because like you've alluded to several times, some people are just trolls. Some people maybe have like valid concerns or valid thoughts like towards it, or some people just get offended over something or just dislike something because it like, I don't know, upsets their sensitivities or something. Like,
well, that's an interesting or a good point, because like you know, like where I'm from, like it's a very, very conservative Christian neighborhood, and I'm not really that way, so like a lot of my books, you know, kind of pissed them off and stuff when I was younger, and at least at first I wasn't like outwardly trying to or anything. I was just kind of, you know, I read Clive Barker and stuff like that, so I wrote stuff like that, and that wasn't allowed, and that's fine, but you know, like those kind of people they're not gonna like that kind of writing.
Yeah.
They're just not. So.
Yeah, and I example, with my book, there's a specific character commits an action. The main girl, she her arc ends like abruptly, and someone who read it said that they were not a fan of that. They said, I don't like that. It's terrible. You should redo it. You should rewrite it. But for me, it seems to be the most logical way to end her arc and the most plausible way to end her arc, because so much of Act 3 of the book depends on this character's arc ending where it does. And I had a reason to justify it. Like, I understand it. To me, it makes sense. Maybe to other people they don't like it. But what I'm trying to get at here is this person also has a very a different palette than I do. Reads different kinds of novels. Writes different kinds of stories. So it's like I can understand why it might not resonate with them.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's okay. Like, it's okay that it doesn't resonate. I mean, it wouldn't be this person's kind of book that they would pick up and read. But I am thankful kind enough to look it over for me. But.
A good example of that is Blade Runner 2049. I talked about Eric with that a few weeks ago. The first Blade Runner is one of my favorite movies. I love it. Never saw the sequel. Never wanted to.
Yeah.
A lot of people really pestered me about seeing it because I had some fucking obligation to, I guess. I gotta spend 3 hours of my life and like $30 to go see it in theaters for some reason. But I didn't see it and just didn't want to. I liked some of the creative team on it. Didn't look like the worst thing ever. I just had no interest. And I saw it and I didn't like it at all. And a lot of people would ask me to see, like, oh, how do you like it? And then you finally saw it. I was like, I didn't like it. I didn't like the movie. I didn't want to see.
Yeah.
I don't think you're an idiot if you like it, but it doesn't appeal to me. No interest.
Yeah. What was this person doing? They took a risk.
Yeah, that might have been a bad risk. And similar, like, I used to drag my mom to horror movies and stuff when I was a teenager, and she wasn't into those, so she didn't like a lot of them because she's not into that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it goes to the sentiment I stated in our last video. I mean, it might not be her cup of tea, but it's not necessarily a bad cup of tea, because to you, maybe a lot of those horror movies were some pretty damn good cups of tea, but
a lot of them in retrospect were pretty bad, I have to admit.
Damn it, what?
Yeah, apparently Ring 2 doesn't hold up.
Yeah, at some point I have to make this analogy work somewhere. I will continue to use it until one day.
I'm sure there was a good one or two in there.
Yeah.
I just don't remember them.
So, moving on. What are your thoughts on twist endings these days? And do you consider them risky?
What's interesting, because I don't really watch a lot of movies. I would say 3 movies a year, because it just takes so much out of me with my OCD. So it's like, if I'm watching it and enjoying it, it's such an experience. It's like draining. It's like running a marathon for me. And watching a movie I'm not really into is even worse with that. So new releases is only 3 or 4 years. Those are the ones that appeal to me. So I don't know the trends anymore. I'm not really up with it. I'm kind of just it's like I heard Doja Cat on the radio yesterday for the first time, because I forgot my CDs in the house, so I had to use the radio in the car. And I was like, oh, this is that person that I've heard about the last 6 months. That's what she sounds like. Okay. And that's how I feel like with a lot of movies and TV shows. I don't follow it like a lot of people do, so I don't totally know. But I remember there's a point in time that's interesting. Do you remember after Saw and after Sixth Sense, there was a period of time every movie had a twist?
Yeah.
Where it was almost more of a risk not to have one.
Yeah.
For a bit.
Same with Inception, with that ambiguous ending. It seemed like that had its own streak of ambiguous ending movies, and in the 2010s, and yeah.
So I don't know if that's going on now or not.
Yeah.
The movie Uncut Gems, you could say, has one for sure towards the end that a lot of people really love. I didn't love the ending, but I get what they were doing. I didn't think it was, I don't want to give it away. That's the tough thing about talking about that kind of thing. I don't think it's a bad decision that they did, and I get why they did it. And it was probably the right decision to do artistically, but it wasn't satisfying for me as a viewer. But I also understand that it's not supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
So on a rewatch, I might think it's brilliant or something, which a lot of people did. So I could say that was one of the twists I remember being used to varying degrees of success. I was thinking about like just twists that worked for me, twists that didn't in general lately, and I was just like in like history of film and literature and all that stuff, and I think some of my favorites. This is a weird one. I don't even know if it qualifies as a twist, but I've been thinking a lot about Willy Wonka lately. In the ending part, where they're in the room, it's probably my favorite scene in the movie. Maybe.
This one with like Gene Wilder, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's in that room with like half-finished things.
Yeah.
And then he's like grilling Charlie, and then Charlie, comes back and gives him the everlasting gobstopper. And then he turns and he's happy. And he's like, "You passed the test." And you find out Willy Wonka, he was like, I don't know if he's a good guy even at the end, but he had some questionable morals.
Yeah.
But at the end, it's a really happy ending.
Yeah.
And it's just like, then they go in the glass elevator, and it's really happy after that. Everything after that scene's incredibly happy, and it's just a success story.
Yeah.
That's probably my favorite, if that even counts. But especially watching it as a kid, it counted for me.
Yeah. I mean, as far as, like, considering twists, like, as being a risk, I would say in certain genres it's probably not as risky, like in the the crime, like mystery genre. Like it depends heavily on having a twist ending. So I'm like, if there's a twist, I'm like that's like expected. It'd be like you said a risk if it wasn't there in that context. But I think, and especially after like the ambiguous endings and all sorts of twist endings, like after Saw and stuff like that. I don't know, at that point I would consider them to be risky since they are commonplace, and at one point, like, I kind of alluded to a little bit, like, it being, like, sort of, I don't want to say, like, unconventional, but, or different, like, than the norm at that point in time, so maybe not, but I think maybe they're coming back into risky style, but what were you going to say?
Well, what about, like, for risks in general, though, like, I guess how I see it, and I get what we're saying, too, but, like, to challenge the philosophy of that, a risk would be, like think about risk-reward ratio.
Yeah.
So even like, and that was a good point with the crime genre. I agree, but it's still kind of a risk in the sense that it's make it or break it. Like there's a risk-reward ratio there on that twist, even though it is expected. I don't know. That's just something I was thinking about.
I mean, and that makes sense. And if we are going in the like twists that like make or break, or things that we like or don't like Agatha Christie is considered, like the queen of like mystery and crime novels, but there's one that she wrote that I read, and I can't remember the name of it, and it makes me upset because I wanted to have it in preparation for this video, but I forgot. So, spoiler alert, like, it was very much like, oh, it was me because I'm the butler and I'm the narrator, and I totally was the one, and
was that the Murder on Orient Express?
No, it was a different one. It was
that's the only one I know of. I know her name, but
yeah, it was like I don't want to say like an off-brand one, but it was like the main character was a doctor, and his like neighbor gets, who's a rich guy, gets murdered, like an aristocrat gets murdered, and they bring in like the detective guy who's like in all of her other books and he deduces that like the narrator, the main character, because it's told in first person point of view from the doctor's perspective, but he guesses like proposes that the doctor's the murderer, and then like the last page is just him being like, it was me, and it was such a weird, vague motivation, and it just kind of like fell flat for me, even though she is like, her other work is great. And another one that like would have been perfect if they spent a little more time working on like character motivation was Don't Judge Me, but Happy Death Day. It was like about this girl. It was kind of like a Groundhog Day kind of book, but it was like a horror movie where she just dies at the end of each day, and she's supposed to find out like who kills her, or figure out who the identity of the killer is. And it at the end it's her spoiler alert, like roommate feeding her like this poison cupcake, which is a really cool twist because like at the end of the day she still eats it and ends up dying. She never guesses it until the end. But the character's like, the villain's motivation was like so vague. It was like, oh, I hate you because you're sleeping with this guy, and that was it.
See, I kind of wanted to see that movie.
Yeah.
But I wasn't like, I don't know. Like, I thought about it, but it seemed too teen girl for me.
Yeah, it was.
And like Clueless is one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
I have nothing against teen girl movies.
Yeah.
But like modern teen girl movies, like I'm a 26-year-old man.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know, maybe I'll see it renting sometime. I don't know. It seems kind of strange for me to go see this by myself crying. So I missed it, and
Well, I'm sorry.
and that twist sounds kind of like what I would have expected. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I love this guy, but you're with him, and you know, that kind of like
Yeah, and it was.
thing, which is fun for some people, but not for me.
It just was like, it would have been like perfect. Like, I wouldn't have changed like that whole like cupcake twist like for anything. It's just like the only thing I disliked about it was why it happened.
I got
Why,
a few
like-
twists I've been thinking about.
Yeah.
Some that work and some that don't. So one is when you works doesn't.
Mhm.
And so the first one that doesn't, I mean, I always talk about this, but I have to. It's like, it's practically a new clause in the long runs. I have to talk about it. But the newest season, Veronica Mars, has the worst twist
Aw.
I've ever seen. It's like top 3 favorite shows ever for me. I'm obsessed with it. And it ruins a show. Like, if they bring it back, and it got canceled after, like, I guess they didn't renew it, whatever you call that. And the fans were
Like, rewind
furious. And I love the 4th season. I'm a defender of it, even though most fans don't like it. But that last 5 minutes is so fucking bad and ruins everything about the show. And it forces the characters to act stupid in order to make it happen.
Mm.
That's the worst part. The decision they made could have worked if they did it properly. They didn't. At all. So that's one that doesn't work. One that does work, I can't even explain why it works. And that's why I want to talk about it, because I can't deconstruct it. I can't say what makes it work for me. But on an emotional level, I guess I can. But like explaining rationally why it works as a twist doesn't make sense. And maybe the supernatural factor's an element to that for me. But Don't Look Now has one of the best movie endings ever, one of the best twists ever. Really great movie. It was done by they did Walk Around or Walkabout, Man Who Fell to Earth, Witches, the Roald Dahl adaptation. I forget his name right now, which is really embarrassing. But he did that, and really, Donald Sutherland's in it. Really classy, great horror movie. And the twist at the end is so unsettling and so creepy and so almost random. It shouldn't work logically in any way, but it just does. It's like you're listening to a song, and all of a sudden, like, it goes into, like, you know, the verse into like a bridge outro kind of deal that's like totally different than the rest of the song, and it works. Like, this is the most obvious example of like this kind of thing, like Bohemian Rhapsody or something. Like, I don't think most people, like, you put that song in the bar and everybody in the bar is going to know the song, and they probably like it. But not everybody in the bar can explain why they like it or why it works. Even though it's kind of erratic, a bunch of different phases to the song and all that. And that's how I feel about Don't Look Now's ending. It's just like, it's great, it's brilliant, it's smarter than I am. I don't know why it's so fucking good, it just is. And then an example of something similar that, I'm not going to say it's a bad ending, I'm not going to say it doesn't work. I like the ending. It's stupid, but I like it anyhow, is the first Saw movie.
Yeah, I can see that.
But I've seen a lot of people online debate about that one, whether it's a good or bad twist ending. And I see both sides. I love that. I love like a satire when it's making fun of people like me, and I get that, and it's funny. But I still kind of agree with the characters being made fun of, like Ron in Parks and Rec at certain points.
Yeah.
Or the other character that's big, the male character. He was in Guardians of the Galaxy and everything. He was one of the famous Chris's. I forget his name of the character on the show. Andy Dwyer. Like, those two characters, when they do something stupid, I'm like, oh, I would do that. That's really funny.
Is it Chris Pratt?
Yeah, Chris Pratt. But then it's still funny. You still get the joke. You still get that you're being made fun of. But you still wouldn't do it differently. You'd still do the same thing if you're in that situation.
Yeah.
But that's how I feel about the debates on the Saw ending, where the corpse in the room, the whole movie, gets up at the end and that's the killer. And people say that's stupid. That's not a twist. How's it a twist? It's random. They could add a potted plant in the corner of the room, and the killer jumps out of the potted plant at the end of the movie.
The killer is the plant.
Yeah. And I get exactly what they're saying, but it just works for me. I can't explain it. I get why people don't like it. I do. I don't know, maybe I saw it as an impressionable gay age, so it was like a, influential early twist in my life.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I can see it being like a really good ending because I don't know, it was very unexpected because you see it's present throughout the entire movie, and you still see it like frame by frame, but the guy just like gets up and is like, see you later.
Yeah, I think it works because like he could have medicated himself or put something to, like, sedate him up to a certain point until the timer went out or something.
Because it's the expectation that the person in the middle of the room is no longer alive. So when they get up at the end, they just kind of walk out like, who is what, who's doing this? And he just gets up and just like, walks out. I don't know. I think it works for me on that level. But say another one that I really like, the original like Black Christmas.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
that's one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, I really liked the ambiguity at the end too a little bit, but
my favorite thing about that movie is it discusses abortion and stuff like that for a movie that old.
Yeah.
And like kind of a sleazy, like it is expected. It's not a sleazy movie, but it's expected to be. Yeah. But like you had I feel so embarrassed. I can't remember her name. The alcoholic girl in the sorority.
Yeah.
Was it Margot Kidder? Yeah, it is. Wow, like Lois Lane. Yeah, she's like this alcoholic, and she's like a really great character. And the main girl's debating with her boyfriend having an abortion or not.
Yeah.
And it's really mature and like sophisticated for a film of its type before the genre even existed.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to talk about that.
You're fine. But no, I think the twist in that, because you have like this, who's making these phone calls? How are we gonna track it down? They're trying to figure out who's making the call, and they just, they figure out, oh, it's coming from inside the house. Like that's just a sucker punch of a twist to me, and I really liked how, they did that, and they kind of do leave it open-ended, which I like as opposed to like the other versions of the movie, but that's beside the point.
It peaks or it ends on the peak of the tension.
Yeah.
And I think isn't the last shot the shot of the eye looking through the keyhole?
Yeah.
I believe.
It's like the front of the house. Yeah. Eye look through keyhole. Front
Yeah,
of
like
house,
imagine if that movie ended with them like arresting.
Yeah.
The bad guy. And like, don't worry, he won't bother you anymore, ma'am. John Saxon takes him away in cuffs, or if they kill him. I don't know. The remakes of that movie, I saw the first remake in theaters, and I remember being kind of like harmless, dumb slasher, kind of exploitation-y kind of thing. But that's I didn't see the second remake because I just didn't. I liked the cast.
Yeah. The one that just recently came out, was it like last year or the year before?
Something like that.
Yeah, I hadn't seen that either, but
it's kind of a fun idea, like an evil frat versus an evil sorority. That's kind of fun. Yeah. It's really weird and different, but fuck it, we already got a perfect Black Christmas movie. Why not do something weird and out there with it? Yeah. Which is a creative risk, and that didn't pay off for them at all.
Yeah. I mean,
but it caught my interest.
Yeah, I was gonna say either way, and I think too, like now that we're thinking about it, just remaking something can be a risk in itself, because especially like Black Christmas, and do you just want to remake the movie? I've seen like 1,500 different remakes of like Alice in Wonderland. Like, how many times can you tell the same story? But if you do something new and play with the plot or play with a certain character or something like that, like that leads to some interesting results. I don't know how to say this.
This is kind of bad. Yeah. This is when I was a lot more abrasive, even though I am now. But one of my good friends in high school, we were talking about Alice in Wonderland and like the Tim Burton version, and I was talking about Tim Burton's my least favorite director. I can't even finish any of his movies. I just hate them. I hate the tone. I hate the humor. I can't stand it. I get why some people like I tried to watch Beetlejuice this past Halloween.
Yeah.
And my roommates were watching it, and I got like half an hour in. I was like, I fucking hate everything about it. This is the most irritating bullshit I've ever seen in my life. And it's like you're like we're watching like a Hot Topic ad or something.
Yeah.
And that's just like the people I grew up around, and the fans of that kind of stuff, I guess, left a negative impression. But I was watching Two Rings. I get why they liked it, but I thought it was the worst shit ever. But anyhow, so we were talking about his Alice in Wonderland movies, and I was like, oh, I can't stand it. She's like, well, I like the Alice in Wonderland book, so like I liked it. And I was like,
yeah.
What the fuck are you talking about? What the hell does it have to do with the book? Yeah. Was there a big battle at the end of the book that I must have skipped over? Did I get the abridged version?
Yeah, like the Jabberwocky thing.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know why that came back to me. I feel bad about it. It's probably why I have guilt about it, because she's a nice girl.
But I guess what I'm trying to say with that point, like when you remake something that is very well loved, I think there is a huge risk, well, with anything, just, or even remaking like a book into it, or making a book into a movie, like you're gonna have comparisons like that, and there's gonna be a risk and a lot of anxiety on like how you stack up or how your version meets or does not meet expectation. Like with Invasion of the Body Snatchers, like, you know, the original version, you know, the black and white version has a very I want to say ambiguous ending. I don't know. It just kind of like drops off, and the whole lore of the, you know, point of interest with the Body Snatchers is you don't know which one who's who, like who's you or who's, you know, one of them.
Real quick, I just want to cut you off to point something out that's totally off topic. You see that over there, the train and the truck?
Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot about the movie Manhattan.
Yeah.
And the opening shot with the Gershwin music and the shots of like the towers and everything.
Yeah.
And how perfect it is. I've been thinking about like my life in my hometown and like how I'd love to do something that beautiful, but like for a more rural setting, how Woody Allen loves New York and presents his vision of it in this like hyper idealized way that's like a fairy tale. I thought I'd do that for like more rural stuff, and seeing that old train there with a like marquee and a rusty truck right next to it, I was just looking at it, I was thinking like, if I could do my Manhattan, that would definitely be a shot in that opening sequence. I know that's off topic, but I had to point it out.
No, I'm glad you did. Now, in case you want to remember it or remember where we were, you can just rewatch the video like 50-some minutes in, and you'll know the spot where we were at.
I might. I honestly might ask if I can come back. I've been thinking about doing that, getting my camera and just going and filming random scenery and stuff, just to put together random like just collages, basically still life cinematography, or B-roll, I guess is the less pretentious term.
Hey,
But
hey, I'll go with you if you want company. I'll totally join. I give you some experience, like filming or something.
why not?
Yeah,
That'll be fun.
We'll make a day of it.
But anyhow, no, I'm glad you brought Invasion of the Body Snatchers up, because the twist ending in that one, another Donald Sutherland movie, is one of the huge ones.
Yeah, and like I was saying, you know, you don't know who's who or anything like that. But in the remake of the movie, which, you know, you're already making a bold step, you know, remaking a movie that's very well liked, but they take some creative liberties with it, which, you know, some fans who love the original might dislike, and others might really like the, you know, Body Snatchers. Whenever they sense human, they emit like this high pitched shrieking whenever a human's near or something like that, which, you know, a lot of people like and think is really great, and is a very interesting twist or a very interesting spin on something that could pay off. Or maybe you're more like 2019 Maureen, who didn't really like that, but 2020 Maureen likes it a little better on the second viewing or third viewing. It really just depends. Like, if you remake a movie and then you add like interesting elements, or you expand upon an idea, which to me is a lot of what Star Wars could have done with their, but I'm not even getting into that, instead of like remaking like certain elements of A New Hope and their Force Awakens, they could have like, I've had this discussion with a lot of people, instead of just practically remaking the movie, which I see can be a good thing, but I also can see why people don't like it, and just take certain elements in the universe and expand like on a storyline or something more. But that I don't.
Yeah, I think I gotta watch those for the show with Eric. And I don't know if I have the endurance for it's probably the best word.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna have to, like, I'll be sweating after the second one, and I gotta take a break. Into someone like a water bottle that could come up and hydrate me. I just have no tolerance for those new ones.
Oh, well, I have a friend of mine you could sit and watch it with. Now, granted, he is not a fan of the new ones, but you guys can sit and talk about it.
I mean, I give them a fair chance. Like, yeah. I'm not gonna watch them and have like I have an opinion on what I've seen, but there's a lot of things that I didn't look forward to that I wound up watching and loving everything about. Yeah. A lot of albums where I didn't like the singles and bitched about it. Turned out to be great albums. A lot of movies with bad trailers were great trailers, or great movies. So I'll be open-minded, but I'm not excited.
Yeah.
Which is the fun of the show, is that I have to watch stuff I normally wouldn't.
I mean, if you don't want to watch it alone, I will sit and watch it with you, because I would like to rewatch to try to give it a fair shake and challenge some of my opinions on movies, like good and bad opinions I have on the movies, and made me see things in a different light. So
My thoughts on it was always, why do I have to spend like 10 hours just to be a good person?
what?
Well, like with those movies where it's always like, we really can't talk about them, we really can't do this, we really can't blah blah blah, if you didn't see them all. Or like people are mad that I like Star Wars but I didn't see the last 2 movies.
Oh,
Like, well, I saw the first one and it sucked ass, so why would I keep watching? That was 2 hours of my life I'm not getting back. And like, you know, if you liked it, that's cool, but like, I'll save my time and money. Same, I always say this about the Rey thing. I was like, why do I have to watch 3 movies to see if she's a good character or not? Why can't I just watch 2 hours and think, okay, nothing there I'm interested in?
Why can't it be like, you know, Friday Night Lights, where like the end of the first episode is like, so you learn so much about character development in just one episode, or even an Avatar, like the first like 5 episodes, and each one's like 20 minutes long. Like you learn so much about, like, you see so much character growth, and you see so much change and so much characterization in only less than an hour.
Yeah, and you want to keep watching. It's
Yeah.
not like homework. That's my thing.
Yeah.
Same with like TV series. Like I love some shows. 6 Feet Under is one of my favorite shows.
Yeah.
I talk about it all the time. I rewatched it this year and it was great. But it's got like 2 seasons at least of bullshit, where it's like not awful. Season 3 gets awful for like 3 or 4 episodes, but it's like kind of mediocre, to be honest. The first season's not the best, and it has some creative risks that I really disagree with. Where it's a quirky show about a family that owns a funeral home, but the father dies. Every episode is like a procedural, but instead of a new mystery, a mystery of the week, it's a new funeral. So it's a new, you see how they die in the first minutes of the episode, then it flashes to white and shows their lifeline, like, you know, 1994 to 2020. And then it's them prepping for that funeral. And Michael Hall, he is a closeted homosexual who's dating a black cop, and you have the daughter who's kind of a weirdo outcast, and you got the son Nate who's kind of a fuck up, and it's just like they're interesting dynamic. It's a weird show. The characters are naturally kind of interesting and quirky, but then they try so hard to make it more weird and more quirky by taking these narrative risks they don't need. Whereas like, let's throw a murder mystery into one season. Let's do this. What if the teenage daughter dates a psychopath who wants to murder her brother? Like, this show's weird enough. We don't need this. And those are risks that I don't think paid off. And I think like the final season of the show is I'm going to say at this point in time, my second favorite season of a show ever. It is so perfect and the most emotional thing ever. It takes the best creative risk I've ever seen in a show. I'm going to say right now. Ever. The last like 3 episodes, like the fact that they do what they do is so brilliant. I don't know how they make it work. And I see how it works. I can't see that. It's not like I can't break down Bohemian Rhapsody, but I can break down that season why it works. Because I've thought about it for hundreds of hours. But, you know, if somebody watched the first season and they were like when it was airing, and I saw the pilot of the first episode of the second season, it's like, yeah, it's starting out pretty good. And like, yeah, the first season wasn't that great. Yeah, dude, you watched 12 hours of a fucking show. You don't want to waste more of your time. I get that.
Yeah.
I love the show, but like, you know, maybe I'll love Last Jedi, but I spent 2 hours of my fucking life watching something I didn't like.
Just, you know, go into it hoping it's going to be like a Gravity Falls or something. Like speaking of risks, like you and I have had this conversation, and you mentioned that season 2, right? It's just 2 seasons.
I think it's season 2. I've heard it broken up into 4 as well lately.
Oh.
So it's either like, I always saw season 1A, season 1B, and season 2A, season 2B, but maybe.
Well, if you're watching it on Disney Plus, I think it's just broken up in 2 seasons, but you know, a character gets introduced in, you know, the middle of the last season, and normally, and it's not just, you know, a minor character, it's like one of the main, you know, big 4 characters in the show, and you know, with the arc and with the story and with the context that the character has, like, I think it works really well. I think it makes, like, you've mentioned this, and you've mentioned the, you know, pros and cons of how it works, and I agree with you. I think adds a lot of heart and a lot of dimension onto the show that helps ground it a little, I guess.
Yeah, like,
and solves the mystery of a lot of what's going on in the town.
It's my least favorite twist, probably, or one of them, probably second least favorite kind of twist, archetypally. Like, the killer was him all along is my least favorite. I'm so sick of that. After like, or he was dead all both those things. After living through like, The Sixth Sense and Hide and Seek, Secret Window, all those movies that do that, I'm so sick of it. Oh, a very good movie that does a great twist on that is called Spiral. It has Joel David Moore in it. That's one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, you had me watch it. It was
Oh,
the one
really?
it was the one for like 2 months I couldn't remember the name of, and I finally broke down and asked you.
Yeah, I love that movie. And it's got a really clever twist on that, I think.
Yeah.
Where it's like, we know that you're expecting a twist. We know you're expecting this twist. So we're going to do that, but the twist of it is that that's not the real twist.
Yeah, it's like...
Because it happens and you're disappointed, like, oh, that's all.
Yeah, it's like a fake-out twist. And it's just wild.
But, no, Gravity Falls has my second least favorite kind of it. I don't know if it's a twist, but like a narrative thing where like, in a show, especially, when you introduce a new character at the very end of the story, and they're like a part of the main crew. Now, typically sitcoms will do it because someone important left the show, so they'll replace them, like Eric Foreman in That 70s Show or something. Charlie Sheen, in like the last 20 years, they were doing 2.5 Men. So they'd have like 20 new people come in for a year to replace them. And I don't think it typically works. I guess Ashton Kutcher, people liked him. I don't watch 2.5 Men. I don't know. I don't watch That 70s Show, but I guess people didn't like that one. But I always say, like, it never works. Don't do it. Just don't introduce a new character at the end of your thing. And especially don't introduce a new character that's, like, awesome and everybody loves them and they're really smart or brilliant or cool. But Gravity Falls kind of does all those things, but they build it up so well. And it's almost like you could tell that they probably had that planned the whole show. Because, like, all the character motivations and stuff makes sense after then. It resolves, like you said, 2 or 3 different mysteries. Then they do a whole episode or 2 just explaining the character's backstory. Then integrate them into the show, just with normal episodes where he's just in it. And then he plays a big role in the end of the show. It's just really, really good structuralism that, I don't know, I've never seen it work as well in any other case.
So, speaking of all of our twists, I guess it kind of answers the last question, but can you name any artist right now that you find to be good at living on the edge or taking risks in their career?
That's interesting. Just because I don't even know who I follow anymore, so everybody's dead. Unfortunately. You know, I'll say...
Just anybody you know.
Living on the edge. So I know there's, like, definitely artists I like, obviously, but ones that are like that are, like, really taking serious risks. I mean, one that I always like and look up to is Max Bemis, but he's kind of out of the game because of mental illness. He basically semi-retired, so... You know, he was one that I always look forward to, and he took crazy risks, ones that I didn't always... Ones I still don't always agree with, or ones that don't always pay off, but he always took those risks. And, you know, he's probably my favorite, I would say. He's the best one I get. Him and, of course, Clive Barker. Clive Barker kind of has his kind of books, but they always take risks within those expectations. Even if he's doing another fantasy book or another horror book, he tips that so far on its head that I would definitely say that he takes some wild risks.
Someone I would say Lucille Ball. I mean, in the example I alluded to earlier, but she came up with some really good comedy by pushing a lot of societal boundaries, and it's very neat. She's actually the first woman to run a major network station, and that was pretty neat to learn that. But I would say her, and though in some ways, like, she basically stayed in the I Love Lucy brand, but she used that brand to explore a lot of different kinds of comedy and a lot of different plot lines, like the pregnancy plot line, and a lot of things that were outside the norm in that time era. So I think it's like she did stay within her comfort zone in her brand, but she did use the brand to experiment with storytelling and comedy. And as far as, I'd say Elijah Wood. I mean, he's never really typecasted himself in any particular role. Like, he wasn't like, you know, the Tim Allen or type or anything like that. Like, you know, he's played in his share of, like, heartwarming children's movies, and he's played in, like, more disaster movies, horror movies, and he was in, like, Sin City. He didn't talk in the entire movie, but he played a serial killer. He was in Lord of the Rings, like, high fantasy. He was in, like, a weird kind of, like, buddy comedy, Wilfred. He voiced, like, kids shows, or cartoon shows like Over the Garden Wall, which is really great if you've never seen it. And he was somebody who's never really put himself in any specific role or any specific genre or any specific area, and I like that he does constantly challenge himself. And like late career Leonardo DiCaprio too, because I know like early career he was very much like the romance guy, like the Titanic, like Leo Mania just lasted longer than it probably should have. And once he started playing in like, I would say even like in the past like five some years, I don't even know how to describe it, but prior to then, like prior to like Django, like every time I was watching a movie with Leonardo DiCaprio in it, it was just like, okay, this is Leonardo DiCaprio, this isn't like, you know, this character, this isn't this character. I didn't see Dom Cobb, I just saw Leonardo DiCaprio, because he kind of like portrayed himself a certain way and carried himself a certain way and with the roles he took. And then he starred in like The Revenant, which is like very different. That was the thing that finally won him the Oscar, and it was very...
Real quick, do you know the movie Akira or Akira?
No.
It's an anime movie. Okay. Well, it's being remade by Taika Waititi, which I wholly disagree with. But he's just not that kind of director, whether you like him or not. He's just not that kind of director. But I always say if they're going to do an American version, the only person I'd want to see do it was Inarritu, guy who did The Revenant and Birdman.
Yeah.
I think he'd be a perfect stylistic choice for that movie.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to bring that up.
You're fine.
Oh, and Leo was producing that as well at some point, so it's related.
Yeah, but I would see, like, once he sort of stepped out of his comfort zone and did that role, I think it was really, and like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it just seemed like after that he felt more comfortable like taking risks with the kind of roles and playing different kinds of characters than he had prior. And so I think as far as like, I don't know who everyone else's favorite Leo DiCaprio is, but I definitely like late career Leo.
I guess if we're including like different generations, I thought we meant like right now.
Oh.
But I guess the obvious example would be Kanye. I should say that. Yeah. I think he's probably one of the best of all time, but you know, you got the obvious ones like David Bowie and Bob Dylan. I would say one of the big ones, and I think this counts, he's modern and old, Woody Allen, I'd say. Because he was known as like a stand-up comedian, and then he did comedy movies like Bananas and Sleeper, and he just slowly kind of became more and more of a dramatic director like Ingmar Bergman or something, an art house director, as his career went on. And of course it worked out for him very well for the most part. He makes a movie a year, so he has room for like a dozen failures.
Yeah.
And even to this day, when I watch some of his movies, you know, like Melinda, which is a film told with, it has like Rhoda Mitchell, Will Ferrell in it, and it's like two people are talking in a restaurant, a playwright, and I think just an author or something like that, a filmmaker, and they're talking about comedy and tragedy. So what they do to challenge each other is they tell the same story, but one's telling a comedy and the other's telling a tragedy. And it's just the same story told twice, but with a different tonal lens, a tonal filter over the same story. And I don't really care for that movie. I mean, it's perfectly fine. It's like a 6.5, 7 out of 10. But like, when I watch something like that, or Wonder Wheel, which I actually really loved, there's always these like twists and risks that I'm just like, how did you even think of this? How do you think to do this? Which of course he's drawing from old playwrights and philosophy and, you know, people that took from those before them, but that's inspiration and a story for another day. But I'd say he consistently takes risks that I find influential.
Yeah, and I guess another risk, well, this is more music, but KG Elephant, their second album, you know, Thank You, Happy Birthday, I believe. Their first album was a very big hit because it had a lot of that like angsty kind of feel. Like you could tell there's a definite line, like very definite, like I don't want to say like a narrative, but because it wasn't really like a story being told, but a lot of angst in the first album, and that was very popular with people like our age at the time because that was just like, you know, I was like 14, I loved that shit. But their second album was completely different. It was just each song sounds unlike the other. It's so disjointed, like starting with something so cohesive as the first album, so unified. They do the complete opposite as like a career, you know, I don't want to say a career move, but each song uses like different instruments, you know, a lot different, like tonally, and it's very disjointed, it's very choppy. You have a lot of like unclean vocals, and other songs it's very clean. Then you have fast pace, you have slow pace, you have garage band sounding songs, and it, as a whole, it's a completely disjointed cluster mess, and I love it. It's actually, like I said, my favorite album by them. But I really do like, they went from, they easily could have been like the angsty people or what have you, but no, they just did the complete opposite. And then for a third album was just kind of, hit or miss. It was just kind of there. They kind of played it safe that time, and then they, moving forward, they drew inspiration from like a lot of 60s music, and that was a great album. Their Tell Me I'm Pretty, and then their most current album I didn't care for, but it was a lot more pop inspired, which I guess that says more about me than the band. But they constantly like take risks, and they play with their sound. And their Unpeeled album too, like they just took a lot of their best songs, their greatest hits, and set like string orchestra music to it. I don't even know how to describe it. They use like a lot of they like strip all those like unclean vocals, and they just studio the heck out of it. And they they filmed it live, but they changed the entire sound of their most loved songs. And it's such a huge thing, because you don't mess with like something that's perfect, I guess. I don't know, but I like how they just chopped up the sound of their best tracks and made something completely different, but also really good out of it. Because there were certain songs that I loved that I was kind of worried about how it was going to be perceived and go over with me, but I like their Unpeeled version of certain songs way better than I like the original version. And it's, if you don't take that risk, you as a listener don't get to benefit from that.
I guess I got a few more musical ones if we're just going with it. You got Sufjan Stevens, of course, and he does like crazy electronic music, more folk music, more pop kind of music. He was going to do a different album for each one of the 50 states, and then he gave that up. It's an album that allegedly he was found discarding. There was a dumpster full of them, or it was just one CD thrown into a dumpster by his recording studio, Asthmatic Kitty, which his stepfather runs. And someone took it and then uploaded and leaked it. Now, either A, they're totally lying, which would be bad, because it's like a decent album for what it is. Like, I think that they could have released that under their own title and gotten some recognition, probably. B, it was all done by Sufjan as a promotional move, as a gimmick, which is brilliant and funny. Or C, the guy's just telling the truth, and that's actually what happened. But then you got I'm going to throw Joanna Newsom in there too, I guess. Why not? Because she did her typical album. Then her next album was like only 5 tracks, or like 12 minutes long each, which is one of my favorite albums of all time. And the next one was a triple album, which is an even better album. So that's a big risk. But I was thinking more along the lines of, and I always want to do a video on this or something. I just never know if it's relevant. Tori Amos and what's the other ones? Oh, Kate Bush. I love both of them, but I'm supposed to hate one of them if I love the other. I don't see why. Why can't I enjoy both artists? But Kate Bush, for instance, like on her album The Dreaming, which is one of the craziest albums I've ever heard in my life, there's a point, there's so many different, she has like a different accent on every song almost. There's a point in the final track where she's hee-hawing like a donkey. It's the most batshit insane thing I've ever heard in my life. And it's brilliant. It totally works too. It's a great album. It's one of my favorites. And then Tori Amos just doing like an a cappella song that's cyclical in structure about getting raped at gunpoint. And like the entire album, Boys for Peel, which is like very influential for me, going from being kind of like a piano singer-songwriter to a total artist type. I've been listening to some of her albums I've never heard before lately, and it's interesting. There's risks in every single one, like huge risks, and I don't agree with a lot of them, but there's a lot of good stuff individually, but it's not like quite what I want from her, you know what I mean, that kind of thing. Like, this is really out there, but I always respect that, like, you could tell it's somebody putting their all into something. And So those are some other ones. But are you about ready to end this episode?
Yeah, I would say so.
We're at the point where we're just listing things.
We're just listing things that we like in here.
Yeah.
Like, see.
What are your favorite risks that Mountain Dew's taken for a new flavor?
See, we're bringing things I like back.
Yeah, we Trojan horsed it in.
This is just one long advertisement for our one series that we did maybe like 4 videos to, and that was about it. Yeah. Anyway, I'm about that. Yeah.
All right. Bye.
Bye.